Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the pork queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. I'm Justin Brady, and joining me today is Beth Shelton, the CEO of the Girl Scouts of Greater Iowa. Beth, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm so thrilled to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Everybody follow or subscribe to the show on your player. We're in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the players. Also, give this show 5 stars. So the first thing I learned when researching you was that you're not really the CEO of Girl Scouts of Greater Iowa. You're almost CEO of Girl Scouts of the entire Midwest, right? Because you're over Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota too, right?
Well, it's Girl Scouts of Greater Iowa, and we just have portions of Nebraska and South Dakota as well, small portions. So all in all, I help oversee the jurisdiction of 70 counties. So we do touch portions of Nebraska and South Dakota, but really the heart of Iowa is what we, where I spend most of my time.
Sure. Okay. But yeah, it kind of surprised me. I was like, oh, it's a little bit beyond the state of Iowa. That's cool, though, that we're infecting Nebraska and South Dakota with good old Iowa values.
That's exactly right.
They need it. No, just kidding. We love all of them. So first things first, everyone dreams of like being a travel reviewer, right? Like writing in the magazine for being a travel review. And everyone also dreams of like being a cookie tester. And we're going to dig into a lot of topics today. The struggles young women face, workforce, work culture, maybe get into sobriety, mental wellness, and the amputee community. It's a lot of stuff that you're very passionate about. But I mean, the first thing is like you kind of lived the dream, didn't you? You were like a cookie tester for this new flavor coming out. We got to talk about cookies, I guess.
Yes, you can't talk about Girl Scouts without talking about cookies. And yes, I am on a very small group of individuals. There's 4 of us on what we call it the Innovation Committee for the Girl Scout Cookie Program. And we feed into a larger group, the Cookie Steering Committee. So we actually get to do all of the new product R&D for Girl Scout cookies. And that actually is as great as it sounds. We are truly not only doing a lot of database research about what flavors are trending and what might fit in the portfolio, but we truly do get to actually taste test a lot of different cookie types and cookie flavors and then give feedback and then test again and test again. So yes, I am in fact, in my official job description is cookie R&D, and it's amazing.
That's crazy. Cookie R&D. So does this actually, like, do they ship things out? Do you go somewhere? Is there a lab? How does this work? I need to know.
I know. Both are true. It used to always be the case, of course, pre-pandemic, that we were in person. So we've got a location in New York we go to. We typically go 4 to 6 times a year as a group. I was just there last week, and we do a lot of the tastings there. So there are 2 bakers in this country that bake all of the Girl Scout cookies for the entire country. What? And they're entirely different bakers. Wow. And so both bakers bring to the table, they work with us on these concepts, and then they both bring their best cookie to the table. And they usually bring 3 to 5 varieties of that flavor profile. So that way we can say, okay, this one's got too much frosting. This one needs more cinnamon. This one has, so we talk about texture, we talk about color, we talk about the coating, and then you have to think about shelf life and how does it feel and is it palatable? And so, the colors on the interior, the colors on the exterior. So we're taste testing all of that. Now, when the pandemic hit, what got really interesting is in order to keep the program moving forward, I mean, the R&D, the lead time is about 3 years from the time we start the concepts to the time it comes to market. It's about 3 years. So a lot of, the cookie that just came out, it's coming out this year, the Raspberry Rally, we were doing all of that R&D during the pandemic. And so we would get shipments on ice from the bakers overnighted, and it would have, 5 to 6 varieties in it. We would sit here on Zoom and we would taste test them together. So it's both. We now have this way to do it virtually that's pretty productive, but there's still something to be said for in person.
I think that's off most people's radar. I think most Iowans don't fully grasp. I would say most Americans don't fully grasp the detail that goes into the process. They probably just think they create a new flavor, they push it out there, and that's it. And then hopefully people buy it. But you're like, are these shipments of cookies coming under armed guard and armored car?
They really, honestly, maybe not armored car, right? But I have to sign a very serious NDA about the work that we do. So even the people that live in my household, my own kids, they know that when one of those boxes comes on ice, they're like, oh, okay, we have to leave the room, which of course is just, torture for them. Everybody wants to know what's possibly coming. So that portfolio mix is really important. We look at so much data, incremental growth, and then of course, ingredient profiles, what's trending, what's accessible, what kind of things might be impacted in the supply chain. You don't want to come out with a new cookie with an ingredient that might be hard to get or expensive to get in a year. So there's a lot of pieces that go into it. And then of course, intellectual property and marketing and licensing, and there's all sorts of things that have to come together. And then you have to do it at the right price on the right timeline. So it's really complicated. But of course, cookie tasting is the most fun part of that. And then all of the infrastructure is where we spend most of our time.
Because a lot of, not to get too businessy or too in the operational weeds, but there's a lot of revenue riding on these decisions, right? That's how, a lot of how you fund the organization. There are a lot of different ways you fund the organization, but one of them is cookie sales. And, so there's a lot riding on it. Oh, one of the interesting things about this, because I have kind of a news background, is, the news writers, journalists, they're always wanting that edge. And I'm not exaggerating. People might think I'm exaggerating just because you're on the show, but this is not an exaggeration. They're always trying to get that edge on new cultural phenomena, new cultural ideas. And certainly Girl Scout cookies is a major driver of American culture, right? And so do you have challenges and issues with journalists trying to intercept ideas, getting information out of you early? Do you have that challenge?
Well, absolutely. If you think about how enticing it is to see the picture of the celebrity, or how the paparazzi tries to get the first picture of the wedding or the baby, right, of the celebrity.
Right.
Can you imagine if you knew ahead of everyone else what the new Girl Scout cookie was going to be? How really how news? Think about clicks. If you could have that name and know that. So we do have very strict embargoes, internally, not only just as a subcommittee, but even for the whole country, for the staff of the whole country, which is thousands of employees. Of course, they get information about what that new cookie flavor is going to be months ahead of the public, because there's a lot of resources and training and marketing and pieces that have to be ready to go the day the embargo is lifted. So they're pretty serious embargoes, and we work really hard to protect that for a lot of good business reasons.
Yeah. So have you had any famous stories then of journalists leaking this stuff early or getting insider access somehow? Has that happened in the past?
I'm sure it has happened. I'm not familiar with a big taboo story like that that's happened, but I'm sure it has. Typically, what's more likely to happen is someone accidentally posts something they didn't realize was still embargoed, and then pretty quickly, I can tell you that grapevine moves quick. As soon, I'm getting copied on those texts. Other people that are on the innovation committee, and we're like, oh, somebody reach out to them and let's get it taken down really quickly. And typically, we can get ahead of it before it grows to the masses. So this has kind of happened where things accidentally leaked and you got ahead of it and stopped it. That's right.
Oh, that's interesting. So I think a lot of people, like I said earlier, might think I'm exaggerating on this. But for a journalist, breaking a story like that, they know what this means. It means a ton of clicks to that story nationally. And so, a lot of clicks equal more advertiser revenue, and that's a big freaking deal. So it is a big deal. Okay, so I want to move to, it's really fascinating. I'm glad we could talk about cookies for about 7 minutes. But
I know, trust me, I could talk about cookies for hours. Sometimes it feels like all I do. We could talk about supply chain and ingredients and infrastructure and payment processing, but let's not. Let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on. I had no idea. That's why I had no idea there was this level of detail, which makes sense, but I didn't know. So I want to get into young women, specifically, obviously, Girl Scouts of Iowa, Greater Iowa, I should say. So what do you think right now? We're coming out of quite a tumultuous time. COVID, and unemployment. I don't think I need to list all the things happening, but what is that number one message for young women right now that you and the Girl Scouts of Greater Des Moines or Greater Iowa team, what's that message you're preaching?
Yeah, well, the universal message and mission that we're really working toward is building girls of courage, confidence, and character. Now, how that plays out in different times in history is different, right? So there, 100 years ago, how that was playing out is they were fighting for women's suffrage, right? And just the right to vote,
Yeah.
and finding your voice when you have that courage, when you have that confidence. And so today it's coming out in a lot of different ways. I think the biggest challenges that we're seeing, not just in youth, but certainly even to a greater extent for females, is what happens when we have that lack of confidence is we tend to see outcomes that are much less positive, right? So more domestic abuse, more addiction, more anxiety, more depression, and then it leads into even career outcomes. So there's very clear data that women who were involved in Girl Scouts have better career outcomes, higher wages, and more of them in politics, et cetera, more of them civically engaged, the higher percentage. And so there's a lot of correlation to really developing and honing those, we kind of think of them as soft skills, but think how important that is. You're using the same muscle when you are on, let's say, a high ropes course at one of our camps, right? And I've done it, and it's terrifying. And you have that moment where you think, I cannot go on. There's no way I can get past this hurdle. I'm 40 feet in the air. I'm having this almost panic attack. And then you work through it. People are cheering for you. You get to the end, you zip line down, and then you're just smiling ear to ear. And you've just learned about resilience and how to flex that muscle. It's the same muscle you're going to use when you're negotiating for a salary, when you're up for a promotion, right? You learn that, okay, I can overcome something. And there's a lot of data around people and women who have more grit and resilience have far better outcomes. Well, you don't just wake up and get grit and resilience. You have to earn it, sort of one hardship at a time. And how do we give kids today hardships? Well, you put them in protected risk, which is things like going to camp, right? Public speaking, all of these amazing experiences you can have, where when we say risk, we're not saying put them, in the line of getting hurt. We're saying, like, push them a little bit past where they think they can go. And that's how you start to get grit.
Right. Don't put them over the shark tank, like a literal shark tank. Work them up to that. Why do you think that is? How are you guys doing that, right? How are you impacting young girls in such a way to give them that confidence? There's the ropes course, but is there other training you're doing? Because this is a real thing, right? Kathy Caprino was on another show I did, and she mentions that, one of the things she works with women on, especially young women, is in a boardroom setting, a man will go right up to a CEO figure and start small talking them and sharing ideas with them. And the women she counsels and coaches will not do that. They stay away, and they're like, good, at my hard work will, show itself through. And she's like, no, it won't. You got to get in there. You have to speak to these people. You have to, kind of like you said, take that intellectual mental ropes course and get to the other side. So what tools have you identified that are really effective at doing that?
Almost everything in our curriculum, starting from the daisies, which are kindergartners, the daisy badges. We have more than 200 badges in the lineup. Almost every badge and experience, it connects to one of four pillars, and those all connect to this idea of building courage. And so let's take that daisy, that kindergartner who's working their very first cookie booth in front of the local grocery store. We've all seen them, right? And you see the ones that are so quiet, they won't look you in the eye, and they're shy and they're looking at their feet, and the parent is helping, or an older Girl Scout is sitting there helping. And then you see the ones that are confident, and you're like, oh my gosh, that girl's got it going on. The one, she's like, okay, 4 boxes for $20, and we've got your favorite. And they're the same demographic. What happens is we move them along that scale. So it starts in their very first experiences. And we hear it all the time with the cookie program, all the time. It is easy to think about it as sort of just like a fun, delicious thing that these girls do. But actually, there's a whole entrepreneurship program around it.
Oh, that's so
and
good.
Being able to talk to a stranger and ask them if they want to purchase something. I know adults in their 40s who can't do that.
True.
So that's no small task. We have 6-year-olds doing it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I did not even think of the sales and entrepreneurial aspect of selling cookies. That's a really good point. I want to kind of move this into work culture a little bit, because this is something else that you're passionate about as well. during COVID, the data that, at least the data I've seen, you may have different data, but the data I've seen showed a lot of women actually exited the workplace when we were doing the work from home thing. And those numbers are a little sluggish to recover. So is this a concern for CEOs and business owners? And are you teaching anything to CEOs and business owners like yourself and what they should do and how they should change?
This is absolutely a concern, and on a lot of levels. From the equity standpoint, when I think about, there's a lot of ways to look at equity, a lot of important demographics to look at. Of course, I'm most well versed in gender equity because I work for the Girl Scouts.
Makes sense.
And it's a big thing I'm passionate about. But when we think about gender equity, having this many, I mean, we talk about the wage gap and the percentage of females that are in leadership. Of course, when so many women left the workforce, and oftentimes not by choices that they wanted to make, right? So they were boxed into this impossible situation and became caregivers due to the pandemic and due to the constraints at work and not being able to do both. And I can't even tell you how much I felt that firsthand. I'm a single mom and I have 3 kids. Trust me, I felt every single day the hardship of trying to lead through a crisis and keep an organization economically sustainable and have 3 kids that were in virtual learning and needed my support and attention. I mean, it felt impossible, right? We can all understand how it happened, but we should absolutely be concerned, not only from that equity standpoint, because the data is very clear that organizations are more productive and more profitable, right? If we're talking the business side, when they have a higher percentage of women in leadership than organizations who do not. So if you have women, and not just women, other underrepresented groups, right? The more diversity you have leading an organization, the more profitable they are, because of course you get a lot of different skill sets and a lot of different perspectives. So it's much better for the businesses, but it's much better for the women, right? When they don't have to make choices to leave careers if that's not the choice they wanted to make. And that's exactly what's happening. Secondly, look at the labor market, right? With the labor market being this tight, unemployment so low, there's entire industries that have women have historically been underrepresented, and now these organizations are having a hard time hiring, and they're saying, I just spoke at a conference in a very male-dominated industry, and they said all of a sudden we're looking, and it's a very blue-collar industry, and they said all of a sudden we're looking at who else can we hire, and you look at the room and it was 98% men.
Right.
Well, I can tell you someone you can hire, but systematically some things have to change because the hurdles women tend to face in the workplace are likely different than what your men have faced in the workplace. And so addressing those and making sure that you're creating a workplace where women can thrive and want to stay is important. So it's very important to business to name this and acknowledge it and see it. It's good for the business to do that, but obviously it's very good for women. I can't even tell you. So we have a full-time staff of 55 employees. And at least 3 or 4 came to me sometime during 2020 or 2021 with talk of needing to resign or wanting to resign. Great employees, great talents who we did not want to lose. So as we started talking about it, it wasn't to go somewhere else. It was because they could not meet the demands of their jobs, the way they were structured with caregiving at the same time. And there's also a child care crisis in Iowa and across much of the country. So many of them were trying to get child care and couldn't get it, right? 9-month wait lists, et cetera. So they had no options. Their kids had to go somewhere. And so as a workplace, we became very proactive about saying, if that's the reason, like, what can we do to help support this employee, this amazing employee who's talented and wants to stay and makes contributions and makes our organization better? And if they don't want to leave and we don't want them to leave, then let's figure this out. Let's start figuring out what it takes to make this work. And we've tried to get really creative. It doesn't mean we have every answer, but organizations should be having those conversations. And now that much of that it's not gone, much of that has slowed down. They've now gotten their kids in childcare. They've sort of gotten through that hump of many of them, their kids are back in school. So now I hear them. I mean, they're not only are they very likely to stay retained as employees. They're very grateful, but we're lucky to have them. And they say, anywhere else I would have had to leave the workforce, Beth. I'm so grateful that we got through this time frame, right? And then I'm still here. And as the employer, I'm grateful. Like, it's a win-win. We just had to stop and be human for a moment and say, what's it going to take to lead through this? What's it going to take to support this person in a way that might be a little bit unconventional? maybe we didn't see it coming, but I mean, welcome to post-pandemic world. Right? Like, welcome to planet Earth. We don't get to just structure everything the way we thought the strategic plan would look.
Right. And I think there is a challenge, though, for some CEOs and some chairs and some business owners, because I think it was you talked about the wage gap earlier. And like that's, U.S. Census data has that data. You're not making it up. But like if you look at the U.S. Census data, that data itself says that women are tending to pick other jobs and men pick other jobs. And like right now, 60% of universities are women and men are like dropping out of college. And, obviously there are a lot of differences in how this is going. So women primarily had to take time off work to take care of kids. So obviously one of the solutions there is that men don't be an idiot, like help raise your kids. It's kind of an obvious thing, right? Men should step up. But what do CEOs do when they're looking at a landscape? And like, I think there was one executive I was talking to in IT, and he was like, I want to hire more women and I don't know how to find them. So is this a problem these CEOs can address, or is this a problem that is dealt with in culture and one that organizations like yours and parents, is this fall on them, or is it both?
I think it's both. You can't ever erase the ecosystem that you're working in, right? So if you think about an industry like IT, which women tend to be underrepresented, you could look at a lot of reasons why. There are things that employers could do to likely make it a more female-friendly workplace. So things like paid parental leave, right? Do they have paid parental leave for both men and women? Because to your point, we can say all day, men step up and help with infants.
Right.
But if the infrastructure is not there for men to step up and help with infants, are they getting paid parental leave? Are there baby changing stations in the men's restroom? Like, there are a lot of ways that it's hard for men to step up and provide that caregiving because systematically that wasn't created. So in some ways, like, yes, the man has to step up in those situations, but also systematically, what can be done? What can we control, right? Because I could sit here and be frustrated all day long about these things, or I could say, as an employer, what can I control? So first of all, do you have the basic benefits in place that would support a female-friendly workplace? And whether someone chooses to become a parent or not, the reality is, if a family is going to have a child, then in somewhere on planet Earth, a female, her female body created that child. Like right now, that is a universal truth. We're not changing. We can't change that piece of it, right? So if my partner and I decide to have a child, the female is going to have to bear the child.
Right.
So that has the impact on her career. So things like paid parental leave, making sure there's support there for nursing moms, making sure that there are things in place for, workplace flexibility is a really big topic, and it can get centered on things like, well, people want their autonomy, and the workforce today wants to work from home. That might all be true. There's a lot of conversation back and forth. What's the right answer there? But if the truth is still, and I think the data suggests that females tend to do more of the caregiving, if you don't have a flexible enough workplace that when daycare calls and they're closed, the school calls and your child's sick, right now data suggests that more often than not always, more often than not, the female is the one dealing with that stuff, then the workplace has to be supportive of that and say, okay, we need to be flexible enough that if Beth has to leave on Wednesdays at 4 because they have early outs, let's create a system that supports Beth leaving at 4.
Right.
But we can sort of get into these conversations like, well, Beth's not as committed, and Beth's, that's a pain. And what about Beth's team? And what about this? But if we're saying it's important to provide equality in the workplace, and we want to attract a demographic that's underrepresented, then we need to name what the hurdles are for that demographic. So in the case of women, the hurdles tend to be pretty universal. The hurdles tend to be around caregiving, and they tend to be around not having other female mentors, and they tend to be around not feeling as comfortable and as heard. And whether it's blue collar or white collar, those hurdles tend to be the same. Not universally, but the data suggests across the board, that tends to be the barriers that women perceive and feel in workplaces. So if workplaces stop and say, okay, what should we do to address that? What should we do when they have caregiver issues? What should they do? What should we do when there's a parental leave situation? Those kind of things.
Yeah, and the reality is, this is a market-driven economy in the U.S., and it's not just a market-driven economy when you think about products sold and bought, right? It's a market-driven economy when you think of talent. And if you want talent in the same way, making a product, right? I just bought a new iPhone and Apple had to design certain things and make it cool and make it appealing to me to get me to buy it. In the same way that is true, it's also the same way employers need to make their roles appealing and sell better features to employees to get those employees. So it's quite simple, right? If you want certain women, if you want women in these roles, or if there are all these women that had to go home to take care of kids and they're sitting here with talent wanting to get back in the workforce and you're needing workers, I mean, you're basically telling people, here are the features you need to make on your product to get that market. Like, this is what you need to do. You can, look at it and hate it all you want, or you can say, I just don't want to. But this is the reality of a market-driven economy. You are competing over the best talent. And, you're kind of laying out the battle plan to do that.
That's exactly right. It's really a moot point whether you like it or don't like it as the leader of the organization. The question is, like, that being the case, how shall I proceed, right? Here is the data around our marketplace today. Here's what our competitors are doing, or here's what our potential employees are wanting. What am I going to do about it? Like, take out of the equation the what if this and what if that and all the emotions around it. And what about that time 6 years ago when we throw it out the window? The data says, if we want to get these employees, here's what we need to offer. So create the plan. How do we offer that?
Exactly.
How do we offer paid parental leave? As a very small nonprofit, we do offer 12 weeks of paid parental leave, and It's not easy. I hear people say all the time, we can't afford that. We're too small, or we have a small budget. So do we. But we've made a choice and said, what if I said we had to do it to my team? What if I said we had to have paid parental leave? What kind of things would we need to have in place? What kind of support? What kind of planning? What kind of lead time? And then turns out we found a way to do it, and we're getting great talent.
Mm-hmm. I bet you are.
And retaining great talent.
Yeah. And this goes into, I had the founder of Starbucks on another show, and I got to meet him momentarily. And this is basically what he confirmed as well, right? He wanted to outgive other companies. That's one of the reasons he started the company, is he wanted to see, can I give health insurance to part-time workers? Can I give college educations? Can I give this? Can I give this? And his board thought he was nuts. And during the 2008 recession, they also said, dude, no one's going to blame you if you scale back some of this stuff. We're hurting. And he's like, no, don't touch it. And, obviously it's a publicly traded company, so he didn't have the ultimate decision, but he shared with how to, sway the board to make these decisions, and look at how it paid off for him, right? And to your point earlier, you mentioned the companies that prioritize this, right? The companies that prioritize being a better human and treating your employees as humans and giving them what they need to be successful, not just at your job, but in life. Those are the ones, by the data, that beat the living daylights out of everybody else.
Right. I get questions all the time because we have really robust benefits, right? We have paid parental leave. We have a lot of PTO. We have a lot of closures for holidays and days to respect and allow our teams to have time off. We have an amazing benefit called paid caregiver leave. On top of everything else, any employee can take an additional 4 weeks paid off for the acute physical or mental care of a loved one or themselves. So these are things that would be easy to say, like, oh my gosh, like, what if people take advantage of that? Or the question I get all the time is, how do you guys get anything done? What about productivity? And I'm always like, well, let's talk about productivity. What are we gauging? Like, what metrics are we using? But then I always turn it back and say, what about engagement? Like, talk to me about engagement in your workplace, because if you have people that are engaged and want to do their best for the organization, like if I went to my, any staff member and said, are you inspired to do your best? If the answer is yes, for the vast majority of them, that workplace is going to be more productive and more effective and more creative and more positive in every single category than someone who's just cranking out more of the widget.
Right. And the engagement issue is a whole nother issue, but that's also an important one you bring up, because people are often judging productivity in the workplace based on butts and seats. And this is not me making this up. This is an annual chief HR officer roundtable that Gallup does every year. And basically, they all admitted this. We don't know how to judge success in our organization and productivity. That's why we just look at butts and seats. And if you're judging productivity that way, that's the problem. That's not how you judge productivity. How you judge productivity is by looking at employees and setting goals with them and see if they can achieve those goals. And if you are allowing people to work from home, for example, or work on a flexible time frame, if they're hitting the goals, who cares? Like, why is it a big deal how much time they sit in a seat? Like, I am an advocate from work in office culture. I think that really helps. That's my bias. I like that. But I will also tell you the data shares that people can be productive anywhere. I honestly wish we had more time. I wanted to get into sobriety and mental wellness. What I will say is go check out your LinkedIn profile because you openly talk about some of your struggles in the past. And so, but I will leave with this. Obviously, we're going to plug the website. But what is that one thing that young women and young girls can do right now and what parents can do, what mothers and fathers can do to set their young girls on a great trajectory?
Yeah, well, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, right, get involved in Girl Scouts because there's a lot of ways to get involved. It doesn't have to be in a traditional troop format, but youth today and girls today are lacking social and emotional connection with others, period. And it's the number one protector against anxiety and depression. So it's not to say there aren't other factors and that anxiety and depression can be very real and need other medical support. But the number one protector in the rise in anxiety and depression today in youth is having social and emotional connection with their peers. And where are they getting that right now? With the rise of technology and, of course, all of the pandemic, they're not getting nearly enough of it.
Right.
And we're seeing now an epidemic of how that's playing out in youth. So number one, get them involved in a way, even if they resist, and whether it's for Girl Scouts or for other youth serving organizations. And I don't just mean organizations where they pit kids against each other. So there's nothing wrong with competitive sports. If you know anything about me, I love athletics. I was a college athlete. So sports has an amazing place for kids. But if the only thing they're involved in is an activity where they are pitted against other kids to be ranked on who's the best and who's not, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a safe space where they can be themselves, be received, have supportive adults, supportive kids, paying attention to each other, spending time in alignment together. And it is things like Girl Scouts. So number one, just get involved in something like that. Good. Right.
Beth Shelton, CEO of the Girl Scouts of Greater Iowa. If people want to learn more about you, or they want to contribute to the Girl Scouts, or if they want to enroll their young girls in Girl Scouts, where is the best place to go? girlscoutsiowa.org, and we pay the membership fee for every single Girl Scout. There's no cost to get involved. Wow. We believe in it we've had enough support and believe in it that much that here in Greater Iowa, there's no cost. We'll pay the annual fee for every single member, every adult or every girl to get involved. And it's easy, it's fast, and it's so fulfilling. Beth, thank you so much for coming on the Iowa podcast. I appreciate it, and I know Iowans do as well. Thank you, Justin. I really appreciate you having me. I could talk to you all day. And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa Podcast.